we can bring in assets for images as textures for our objects. We don't have to only use colors, and we don't have to only use images as background. So let's say I go to find a texture. I'm just going to write metal texture. Go to images, and there are texture libraries. I have them linked in the document, in our resources document. There's lots of libraries that are just meant for textures for things. I'm going to grab this one. So I'll do File, Save Image as Metal, and I'll save it to my desktop. And then I'll go back to Glitch, to my Assets folder, and I'll upload that metal image and open it. And now if I copy this link and I bring it to my assets, and I put image ID equals metal, and the source is that link, I now have a metal texture that I can use. And I'm going to apply that to the box. So I will write that here. And the way that you add a texture to one of the entities is with the material component. So we write material equals, and then we do source, src, colon, and then the hashtag metal. So now that metal material was applied to my cube. And the color is a part of the material, but it's, oh, let's see, where did I write it? It's combining both of them. So normally we would do this. I can erase this color, and it will just have that photograph as my texture, which makes it look like a metal box. And I can do this with everything. I could also add that color if I wanted to. Here's my box. Here's my box. In the material tag is where I could put the color again and do color blue. Because I forgot what that hexadecimal is. I wonder if I can write light blue. I can. Light blue. So the color, anything that's on the surface, the texture, there's a whole component that is called material. And we'll go more into that as we work with 3D objects and 3D models. But this is a basic way to start to lay out a scene in 3D, is using primitive objects, building them, putting them together, putting a sky, and then laying them out spatially. So I'm going to add the metal actually to my mushroom, which is here. And again, we write material equals, and source is metal. And I'll put the color inside of that tag like this. Radius, height of the material. And you put a semicolon in between these attributes. Now let's see what has happened to my cylinder. Oh, there it is. Let's move this over. Position, right, I did this. Okay, so we don't want that all the way over, and then let's bring it to 0. And 0 for the position. Okay, so now we can see this cylinder here, and I can add this also to my little mushroom top, which is the cone. So I like to write the material wherever the color is. So now material equals SRC colon hashtag metal. And then the color, once we have it in here, we change it so that it's written all within the quotation marks, so we don't want double quotation marks. Okay, so now we see that we have this little mushroom that's made of metal and this box, but our texture image has a seam, which we can't see. It lines up perfectly with our box, right? So it's easy to match hard lines with hard lines, but it's more difficult when we have rounded surfaces to hide those things. So we can change the metal pattern and play with it a little bit by changing some of the way that the pattern is repeated. So I could do repeat, and it will repeat the X and the Y 4 times if I write that. And that's the cylinder top, or the cylinder bottom. And I didn't put a semicolon there, so it didn't do it. So now it did it. So now I've repeated that, and I made a kind of grid to make it look more intentional. And I can do the same thing at on the cone and write semicolon, repeat. I'll do 7 and 7. Okay, now it gives it this kind of different sort of look. And the image that I got from my material has these shadows built in, which looks great on the cube, but here it gives a different kind of pattern. It's kind of neat. If I didn't want those shadows built in, I would have to get a different texture. So the kind of texture that you get, this one might have been better for that because there's no shadows on the edge. But those texture images can really change how your piece looks, and you can edit those images with Photoshop and get a lot of really great textured look based on just the 2D images that you bring in on textures. Okay, so let's see, I don't have to repeat both. So this is my cone. I could repeat just one on the X axis. So I could repeat that way. And I could, not do them the same. So that's repeated once. I could repeat it once the other way and do 1 and 7. And it will do 7 this way. I liked the way that the last one looked, so I'm going to do 7 and 1. Looks more like a little umbrella now. So the material is a component that we will discuss further as we work with 3D models, but it is important to know that you can do a lot with just a few things like material and basic shapes and the space and images in the background to lay out the beginnings of a 3D scene. I'm just going to show you a couple more things before we end. And let's look at this in a new window. So one of the things that we can do is use a built-in feature of A-Frame called the inspector. And if you hit on a Mac Control Option I believe it's the same on PC. You might try Option Command I. But Control Option I, it opens up this inspector tool, which lets us view our 3D scene, oops, from the point of view. I just zoomed out all the way. Here, let me refresh that. Control Option I, zoom out slowly. If I zoom out, you can see there is a giant sphere, and that is where our equirectangular image as a sky is mapped onto. So it's this giant sphere that wraps around inside of this image. And now if I zoom in, you can see the plane is here and our objects here. And I can grab this and look around, and it helps me to kind of see the layout on through the sort of like build view. And I can move things around. If I click on the torus knot, this 3D object gizmo shows up, and I can be like, oh, I want to move this here, and I want to move this over here. While I'm laying it out, let's say I wanted a whole kind of row of torus knots over here, I could lay those out and it will give me the position, or if I do the rotation, there's also this rotation here, I can move these so that I don't have to do that kind of constant guessing of where I want things to go. I'm like, oh, I want it rotated like this, and then I'm going to position it right over here. And then, oops, I zoomed in too much again. I have this, my mouse is set a certain way. So I can move this, and then I can see over here, okay, that's what the position is. It says copy entity HTML to clipboard. I have to copy it, because this is just a tool and it doesn't automatically save or change our code over here. So now if I refresh this, all of those things I did don't remain. I have to copy it into here. So I'm going to just copy that. So that now gave me what that position was. So if you see, I copied it over here. I just put another torus knot. That position that I moved it to in the inspector view is now updated, and I can use that in my scene. I now have two torus knots on top of each other. So that's a really handy thing to use while you're building out a scene, is the inspector view, because it saves us some time, and also it brings up different things. So if I go to the inspector again, Control Option I, and I click on my box here, you also see here a material component, which it shows us more things about what we can do with the material. So there's a lot more things that we can do with the material. And this is really how you make things look more or less realistic. So we're just going to look at one thing here. It's called metalness. So I got this metal texture, and I want it to appear to be more like metal, which is reflective. So I'm going to take this. It's the default is 0, so no metalness, and the most is 1. So you can think of it as percent, 0% to 100%. So I'm going to put it at, say, 0.8. And what I'm doing is I'm just clicking here, and then if you drag left or right, you can change those values, or you can type it in. So I can put 0.8. And I get this preview here. Metalness is 0.8. Again, when I go back to my scene and I refresh this, it's not going to show up. I have to put it in, but I know what to put in. I saw this preview. So I'm going to go to my box, my material, and I'm going to add metalness as 0.8. And now I have this metalness here on top of my texture, which makes the light reflect on it more like metal. But you can't really see what I mean because I have to add some lights for you to see that. So now, if we go back to our primitives, A-Frame has given us a great little primitive light. And there's 3 different kinds of lights. We have a directional, a point light, and an ambient light. So let's grab some of this. Let's do a directional light. And I'll copy that in here. Okay, so now all of this is turned red. I can position this farther away. Let's see, let's make it 4. Let's make it 10 in the air. And I'll put it -6. Okay, so that's behind the object. Let's try 4. Front, yeah. And actually the plane, let's turn it to, oh, did I get the point light? Oh, it's a directional light. Let's make it pink, a little softer. The red is quite bright. So you can see it's coming from here. I'm going to bring it down. Let's do -2, see how that works out. And where is my box? X is -1, so if I do -2, -0. Okay, 1 is good. So I'm adding, I don't know if you can see, let's go to the big, well, let's add 1 more light. Okay, so, oops, that's wrong tab. So here is a blue point light. So let's do this. Oh, I think there's the intensity. Let's put it up in the air. It looks something. Yeah, so you can see as the lights hit it as I move around. So the blue lights, the blue is not a great color for light. It's hard to see blue light for eyeballs. Let's do that light blue again. Okay, so there it is. So you can see how, let me position this lower. It's at 5. Let's do 2. You can see how the light reflects on this box differently than it reflects on the sphere here. So when that light is really directly hitting on the box, it's going to reflect a lot more than the other objects. And how we light things is similar to how we light things in film. We have to really think about our light placement. So I'm just kind of throwing these lights in here. That's why it's difficult for me to get the right angle. Let me open it in a new window. So you can really see the difference. If I zoom out and I move around these objects, you'll see the way that the metal light reflects off of this, a lot more shiny, and then there's a lot more shadow there too. And I've put that light over here so it's really bright on one side and not on the other side. So you can really build out dramatic looking scenes with some primitives, some textures, and some lighting placed in different ways. And the material is something that we'll look into more as we look at the 3D objects. So make sure that you are familiar with all of the things that we discussed in this tutorial. And for your assignment, you will go through and build your own A-frame scene using these things, and the directions will be listed in the module for week 2 under the assignment tab. Let me know if you have questions, and good luck.